So welcome to part one in a three-part series using digital to grow your practice. It is being presented by Jimmy Stegall, MBA CDT. Tonight is part one, a review of technology, orthodontics, and crown and bridge. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Jimmy Stegall, MBA CDT. He is the Dentsply Sirona Procedural Solution Specialist for the Lab Division. Jimmy Stegall is a seasoned dental lab operations and management executive with more than 43 years of teaching and clinical experience in the US and Canada. He is a published author and has assisted in research with projects with dentists, universities, and manufacturers. After a successful 35-year career helping to build and lead a large dental lab in South Carolina, Jimmy is now a national procedural solution specialist for Dentsply Sirona, where he has provided more than 400 clinical and laboratory educational events. As a key opinion leader, teacher, and trainer, Jimmy has demonstrated a history of providing relaxed, informative, results-oriented strategies and techniques to dental practices and labs throughout the United States. And again, it is my pleasure to introduce Jimmy Stegall. Take it away, Jimmy.
Thank you, Jessica. Good to be with you again, and greetings from hot and humid South Carolina. It's one of those days in South Carolina where the temperature and the humidity are very close together, right around 90 to 92 degrees and 90% humidity. So that's our summers, but it's good to be with you guys again and start this journey about, figuring out ways to use our scanners in the practice to not only scan for crowns, which they're great at, but also so many other workflows that we can integrate, which will help utilize the device more, get more income out of it. And of course, we get our skills moved up as well. And we're going to break this into categories that you see on the screen. And tonight we're going to start off with the technology in general. And we'll talk about the ortho workflows first, and we'll move into the prosthetics area. And we'll finish up tonight with nothing really on crown and bridge, because just the basics, because that's what everybody knows, right? And that's kind of what the main use of the scanners are for, is scanning a crown prep. So there's not a lot of new information there. But next time we'll start with the dentures and partials, and that's where we all get excited, because those are kind of new and exciting ways to use the devices and make our world easier in those areas. So I'm sorry, let's get to it. So disclosure, you do have to know that I do work for Dentsply in order for those CE credits to be valid. So I am a paid employee. I'm not a commissioned employee on PrimeScan or any other device that our product that Dentsply sells. As a matter of fact, you will see and hear me talk about other materials, as it should be. We're here just kind of share knowledge and learn, but I do work for Dentsply. So now that you know that, last thing you need to know about me is when I'm not teaching and training, I'm spending time with my grandkids or hanging out in SEC football stadium somewhere, or cooking something in the backyard, or sometimes even shooting some sporting clays with my buddies. So other than teaching and training, which is surely about 80% of my time, that's Jimmy in a nutshell. So let's talk about digital impressions and how far we've come. I can remember the very first one of these that I saw. I immediately thought about, oh man, this will be so nice for everybody to not have to deal with the trays and the goop, and patients don't like it. And it is a mess. I can remember my dentist early on in my career used hydrocolloid, and that was a mess with the water tubes and the coolant and the heating up the colloid and make sure everything's right, and water coming out, and it was a mess. And but standard trays, as polyvinyl's got a little better, it's still messy, and patients aren't big fans of this. But it's kind of the way we've done it. And still, I would say probably 30-40% of the market are still taking a lot of traditional impressions. And we know they work, and we know how to make them better. I have a full class on taking good traditional impressions. But in today's world, we're doing some really fascinating things like virtual reality. So, here's a dentist wearing a VR and looking at various scans and compiling all these scans into an image that he can look at through the virtual reality. And we can connect this to our intraoral scanners. We connect it to cameras. But in this particular software, we're just merging, CBCT scans, digital scans of arches, X-ray scans with implants. And it's just wild to look at the sinuses and the skull and, all the things associated, knowing that that's where we were and that's kind of where we are. And so we're moving away from trays and material. And, again, I do a lot of clinical programs. And, over the last 20 or 30 years of doing these programs, as these things start to come on the market, I would ask people at every clinical lecture I did, how many have an intraoral scanner? And, for the longest time, it was, 7 to 10%. Then it moved up to, 12. And then we got to 15 to 17%. And it kind of hovered there for a pretty long span. It's only been in the recent years, 5 years or less, that we've seen a drastic rise in the increase of scanners in a dental office. And now we're in the 60 to 70% range, depending on whose data you look at. But still, it's quite a bit. And it surprises me to this day, like currently, when I ask that question, almost 3/4 of the room always raise their hands if they already have a scanner. So I don't know if COVID had something to do that, kind of generated the interest to say, hey, this is a good time for me to get this, learn this. But I think it's great. I always felt like that, this should be the norm in a general practice, that and specialists. You'll see as we get into the implant section how we integrated into a specialty practices. But capturing data this way is so much more accurate, so much more consistent, patient friendly. And, I've said all along, for 20 years that patients are going to be demanding it of you at some point once they learn of what's out there and they hear about their friend and how their friend, their dentist waved this magic wand in their mouth, and, you're still putting this big tray of goop in my mouth. Why aren't you on board? And you're going to hear things like that. And so I learned pretty quickly. Again, I ran a large lab of 130 technicians. So I knew that I would be getting these things. And so I needed to teach myself and educate myself. So I went and became a clinical trainer for all the major systems, because I didn't really care which one dentists would use. I just wanted them to use one, because the ones that were using them, we were seeing a drastic difference in consistency of product. Way less seating time with contacts and occlusal adjustments, fewer remakes. And, as that grew and the usage, developed further in the practices, dentists would tell me things like, this is something that's never coming out of my practice. And so I advocated for it. I would, get the local reps of all the different systems to come to the lab and do a demo of all their systems. I would, connect a rep with an office and say, hey, you need to go by and do a demo for this guy. He's really thinking about it. And again, I didn't really care which one. I just wanted my dentist to have one. And I still feel that way. I think everybody should really have one of these things today because of how much they can do for us in the practice and make things better. And so I learned how to help people with all of them. And there have been changes. There've been leapfrogging of technologies of this one's good and this one's not quite as good today. And then all of a sudden that one's good again. But today's current generation, they're all pretty solid, and we're getting really good data. And to me, this is all this is. This is a data acquisition. But so is a traditional impression. That's data acquisition. But I like the digital aspect. It's more consistent and, again, more predictable. So I'm a firm supporter, have been, always will be. And I think that my advice to folks that ask me which one, and we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes, but I said, look, you need to get 2 or 3 in your office and spend, a day, half a day, a couple of hours, and scan a patient or two, right? And just get a feel for the software, the wands themselves, right? And the support, and just add all those things up to which works. And they all have sort of the same overall workflow, right? We're going to capture and scan, and we're going to take data, right? And we're going to move it somewhere to do something with. And we are certainly approaching, a saturation of the market. When you have a group of 30 to 50 dentists in a room and 70% indicate that they now have one, we know that we're getting good saturation, and we know we can take advantage of that, for our patients. So which one, right? There are many out there, and there are many versions. And again, everything's a factor, right? What is it that you want to do? How does the footprint fit within your office, right? Laptop version, a cable only version, or a cart you can roll around. How comfortable is the wand? How intuitive is the software? All of these have been really good devices. Right. But let's go back in time a little bit. And this is one of the very first Optero users, right? And I look back at this and I think, wow, we just thought this was the coolest thing. And I look at it now and think, wow, that wand is so big. And I'm watching this guy, and this guy this is early adopter, and this is a dentist who said to me, "I'll never be without this thing again." We would have to call this guy and say, "Is everything going okay?" Because we don't hear from you hardly at all. He said, "Oh man, it's great. Contact exclusion. I don't have to adjust anything." What he's doing in layman's language is he's taking a digital triple tray, right? He's scanning the master arch, a quadrant, and he's scanning the opposing, and then he'll hear him tell her to close, and then he'll scan the buckle for the bite registration. That's kind of how all of them still work today, right? We're going to scan the master, we're going to scan the opposing, we'll scan the buckle surface with the patient occluded, and that's our bite. And those are the 3 scans we need for any type of workflow or any type of restoration. Now you can tell how old this is because of the crappy cell phone camera video that we've got, and I'm trying to get him and then measure and see how long it takes. But that's basically I don't remember what looked like about a minute and a half of impression, right? A minute and a half scanning time for a quadrant single arch tooth crown. That was fantastic. And we are still in that ballpark. Actually, some scanners are a lot faster than that today, but we've moved away from these scanners being quadrant only to being full arch scans and capturing them, almost in the blink of an eye. The speed developed, the cameras developed, and all that made it easier chairside, right? And so some of these videos are not working. One of the things that bothered us early on is that when we scanned something that wasn't part of the tooth, that it would capture it. We'd get to the end of the scan and we'd have to use some sort of tool in the software to cut out the thumb or the tongue or the rubber dam or whatever, the mirror handle, whatever was in the way. But as softwares progress, like the Prime Scan here, you notice that we started with the thumb and it captured it pretty well. But then when we changed it to scanning teeth, and then we tried to scan the thumb again, watch what the software did. It's actually taking the thumb out as we're scanning. So we don't have to manually do that anymore. That's just an advancement in the software and the algorithm. So, odd devices, mirror handles, tongues, right? Assistant's fingers, all those are automatically cut out with this particular scanner and software. Another challenge early on, right, and until the most recent scanner technologies, was different types of materials in the mouth, whether it was metal or amalgam fillings or porcelain, gold crown, anything. Most scanners would really struggle, and still a big majority of them do. But again, this is the Prime Scan, and it is not hesitating with all these different type of materials. It is still moving right along and capturing all that data. So we've really changed, right? And we've moved into an area where if we're taking an accurate scan quickly, right, what are we doing with it? And there are certainly various workflows here, right? I could take a scan in a dental office and move it over to a dental office crown design software and then go mill that crown in the dental office, right? Those are viable options, and certainly a percentage of dentists like to do that. But in all the data of all the scanner people out there, right, it's pretty much agreed that we're in the 90 to 92% of dentists that use an intraoral scanner are sending it to a lab. Right, we're all still used to the lab workflows. The lab workflows is what we know, and if you're a dentist, doing lab work, digital or otherwise, may not push your buttons, right? And so it's clearly that if 90% are sending it to the labs, that most dentists don't like to do that. And there's always things to consider whether you want to do that or not do that, right? Space, time. But lab guys have been doing this for a very long time, and they're very efficient at it. So they can keep the ball rolling and moving for you. But when we have intraoral scans from various types of scanners, and they go to a laboratory, and the laboratory has various types of softwares. Most labs use 3Shape, but there's still a lot of labs that use InLab and a lot that use exocad. But all these scanners can send files these days to any of these lab software. So in the beginning, we did have challenges with the technology that said, Oh, you got to make sure that your lab is exocad ready, or Trio scanner ready, or Itero scanner ready. They have to have a software, they have to have an account, all those things. Pretty much now, most every lab and most every lab software that they use can receive any type of scans. You may have to do something a little different about how you get them to them, but for the most part, we don't have any issues of reading scans. And it looks like we're having some technical here with video. I'm sorry. The reason that labs are good at this, right? Because they've forever been making teeth, right? And just moving the manufacturing method from like investing and casting over to designing and printing, or designing and milling, makes the labs more efficient and more consistent, more predictable, and also allows them to keep up with the demand. If you don't know, the lab business is really struggling because we aren't creating dental technicians in this country hardly anymore. When I went to dental tech school, there were 35 to 37 dental technology programs in the US. Today, there are 8. Right. And so educationally, we're not making them. The military used to train dental technicians, and they're not doing it any longer either. So labs have to figure out ways to be more efficient, and digital and CAD CAM, has been the answer to that. And, when you can, let's say that I needed to sit down and wax and cast and finish a gold crown, right? That's a fair amount of hands-on time. I can do it in the digital world. I can design it on the computer. I can print out the wax and then go cast that, or I can design it on the computer and then go mill it out of zirconia, and in about a fourth of the time. So it helps us, and it's bulky, right? I can put a puck in a milling machine and mill 20 something crowns, in one mill run, and it's just a faster, easier way to get things done. Plus, it's more predictable. Now, printing technology has changed, and there are many out there. There's no sound here, but just look how far we've come with printers. So here's a printer that all the resins are in these cartridges, like VHS tapes, that get loaded into a holder, right? And so it's all encapsulated. So we don't have bottles, we don't have sticky, we don't have lids. So we just kind of get the cartridge, load it into the holder, and then load it into the printer. And if you see that little what looks like a Brita water pitcher to me, right? The water pitcher is actually where the part goes. And so we're going to put that pitcher in that printer, close the door, and inside you'll see that automatically, robotically, the resin gets poured out into the print tray. Right, the light starts doing what it does, and we're curing a night guard in this animation. So, whatever time that takes, right? So now it's printed, right? And then you see the night guard hanging there. We take it out and put it in the other device, which happens to be the wash and cure station, right? And you push go. And now all this is handled behind the door of the device. It always amazes me to watch how technology develops, right? We've been doing this manually in 3D printing for years, right? But here now it's all in this little self-contained Brita filter water pitcher, and it's all being printed, it's being washed, it's being light cured, right, and dried, and when it comes out, it's pretty much done, right? All I got to do is polish it. And that's how far we've gone from 3D printing with the sticky mess and alcohol, and which is tough, and it's you got to make sure everybody's careful and all that. And technology changes every day, and it's really fun to watch. And so if you go in a lab, you can see a lot of this stuff, but it is slowly moving into the dental office. So I mentioned this already, right? We're down the number of schools, and we're down the number of labs, right? We've gone from 14,000 back in 90 down to, around 6,000 currently, a little less than 6,000. And so it's a struggle, right? Labs are really challenged to find the technicians they need to get the work done. And so that's where digital technology has really helped keeping labs ahead of the curve, the ones that are advancing, right? Some labs still don't believe in it, and so they're getting left behind, and eventually they just get burnt out. So the number of dentists going up, number of labs are going down. We've got to be able to keep up. How does that happen? Well, scanning, right? Again, I've already said this, about 90% of dentists that have a scanner are using a dentist to lab workflow. The chairside workflow is certainly viable and an option for some folks, but we're going to talk about the biggest part of the pie, which is, the clinical to lab workflow. And this is just one schematic of one system, but they all pretty much work the same, right? When you pick up a scanner and you scan a patient, right, you're going to scan it and you're going to send it to some portal, right? And whether it's 3Shape, Communicate, whether it's the iTero, My iTero, whether it's Connect Case Center, right? Everybody has their own cloud-based thing where some server somewhere where your scan can go and park. And somewhere in your setup of your case, you will have said, I want my case to go to this lab, my favorite lab. And so the lab is also connected to these portals, and the lab will get a notification that, hey, Dr. Smith has sent a scan to you. So they will go up to the portal, the same portal, and download your scan and start to work. In the beginning, all these scanner systems were kind of closed, and you could only get that manufacturer scanner. It could only go to that portal, and it could only go to a lab who was enabled to use that particular type of software. That is not the case anymore. The CEREC system is probably the one that has the baddest reputation about being a closed system, but even that one's not closed anymore. We can send it to Case Connect Center. Let's say it's a Prime scan, it goes to Case Connect Center, and we can tell Case Connect Center, hey, I need it to export as an STL so it can go to another type of software. That's a very doable thing. It's easy for the labs to set up. And to the dentist, you don't have to learn anything. You just scan it and send it to the portal as you always did. And the labs figure this out, and they do make all the connections to make this happen. So again, it doesn't matter what scanner you're using. The lab just has to know how to make those connections and make it work, but it does work. And so you can use any lab that you want. And so that gives you the full freedom, right, to be able to pick the scanner you want and then, do with it what you want to do with it. So, there's a lot of good news here, right? Your patients are happy about this, right? They love it, and they actually expect it. When I go in dental schools now, I see intraoral scanners in all dental schools. I'm old enough to have worked for some guys that, are in my generation, and a lot of us guys, and those dentists would say to me, I'm too old to learn that now. I'm not going to do that. I'll leave that to the next guy that comes in. And I say, look, at some point, you're going to be looking for an associate, right? And you're going to be interviewing these young kids out of dental schools, and they're going to look around your office. And if they don't see an intraoral scanner, that's going to be a box that's not checked. And when they go to the next practice to interview and they do see a scanner, that's a box that is checked. And they're going to be looking for it and expect it. This is the way, all the younger dentists are learning to do it. MUSC here in my state was one of the first to integrate this, and been a requirement for some years that the students in the student clinic starting in the second year must use intraoral scanners. And so they have multiple versions, multiple brands, and all the students have to kind of work around and at least try all these scanners. And that's the way data is going to be captured 100% of the time at some point in the near future. So opportunity is kind of why this series was put together, right? So if you do get a scanner, right, what are your opportunities, right? How can you utilize it within your practice to, maximize the ROI on the thing? You're going to pay. It's not cheap, right? We know that. And we certainly want to utilize it. And in my opinion, when I'm helping with clinical trials or training in offices, I still believe to this day that they are way underutilized, which is, again, was the motivation for putting this program together, and to give folks some ideas about how we can integrate it. Digital absolutely helps, guys. There's no doubt about it that digital makes things better. If you come in labs today, and you'll see labs using 3D printers, and National Dentex, our host tonight, they use a lot of this particular printer. And this is the top printer on the market, in my opinion. The carbon printer can do some amazing things, and it's super accurate, super fast. But when we watch lab guys, design models in software and then moving over to a printer software to get them oriented and ready for printing, right? And and then just walk over to the printer and open up a bottle of model resin, pour it in the printer, and print the models. And let's see, I think this thing shows a screenshot of the time. Be on the lookout for, how long it says. You saw there was probably what looks like about 8, maybe 10 quadrant models on there, right? And so we're going to get it poured up, and I think it was like 30 minutes to print this one tray of models, which and this only scales up with more printers or with bigger printers as resins and materials, move forward and get better. The speed shortens, and it's it blows me away how far we've come in 3 or 4 short years. So back to the intraoral scanner, right? This is a question I get all the time, right? So Trios, Medit, Itero, 3M True Depth, Prime Scan, which one, right? And I said, look, I made it clear in the beginning. I do work for Dent Supply, so I'm gonna tell you about the Prime Scan, but you can ask me about these others because I'm trained on all these others as well. And I'll say this: any of the brands that you're looking at here, with the exception of the 3M True Depth, I'm not even sure it's available anymore. But the other four, pretty popular and actually not bad, right? And price points are different, capabilities, how they do things are different. The Itero is a great scanner. It was my first scanner. It was the one I learned on. I got a really warm spot in my heart for it. It's owned by the Align company, who does Invisalign, so it's very oriented toward the ortho workflows. Trios is more of a full feature crown bridge implant. 3Shapes in the 3Shape world, which is the software that 83% of the labs use. PrimeScan is a fully open scanner, and up until the Trios 5 came out, was the most accurate scanner. It's still the fastest. Does a couple things better than the Trios, but the Trios does a couple things better than it. The Medit is kind of the entry level. More, I don't want to call it a bargain because I don't think it's a bargain scanner, but it is a little more cost effective and fully open, full STL scanner. So again, I tell dentists, look, you need to get a wand in your hand, or 3 wands in your hand, right? Whether you do this over a month, right? You get them in once a week, one patient, scan a crown, right? Let them walk you through it. Just allocate the time and, look closely at the screen, look how we move from step to step to get the scan, capture the data, send it off to the lab, and do that with 2 or 3 scanners. And you will know pretty quickly, which one fits in your hands and, which one works. Having a lab partnership and using a scanner, you get a lot of good benefits, right? I always sold my lab prosthetics at a discount to folks that had scanners because it was better and easier for me, right? I'm going to have all the restoration choices, right? It's nothing different. We can make anything we used to make, still use the intraoral scan. I had some customers who did in-office milling, so we had design services, right? So a doctor would scan a patient, send me the scan. My designers would design the restoration, send that design back to the dentist, and he would load it and mill it. Some folks said, I got a mill, but I'm just tired of doing all that and it takes too long. How about if I send you the scan and you design it and you mill it and then send it to me? Well, we can do that as well. And one of the things I found early on, that by learning how to train clinicians and assistants, that enamored me. And I know, we're with NDX again tonight, and they have a full team of folks. That's what they do. Right? They have a full team that they cover the country, and they walk you through it. They train you. And, that is the partnership you're looking for, right? Not just the lab says, oh, I can take all the scans. No, look for the lab that's going to help you, because there are learning things, right? How do I scan for this? What if I want you to just make me a custom tray? Can I scan for it, right? How about ortho aligners? What do I need to do? Veneers, right? Can I do veneers with my scanner, right? Implants, all those things. The lab can help you. Find you a lab partner like NDX that will do that for you. So support, in my mind, is probably, after you decide which scanner fits in your hand the best, it's your next most important decision. What kind of support am I going to get, right, from the scanner company, from the lab, right? Who is going to help me? Who's going to train me? Who's going to teach me how to do an implant, right? A denture, a crown, and you find those folks, right? And that's who you want to connect with. It's not just about buying the scanner and saying to the lab, okay, I'm ready, let's go. And so you have you've got programs like, what NDX, I told you, they have a team of folks that's what they do, right? And they do webinars, they do live events, they do in-office support, they do phone support. And, I think their intraoral scanning support is probably one of the best in the country. But, 3Shape has training as well. All of the scanner companies, when you buy one, you're going to get 1 or 2 days of training in your office. I highly encourage you to just block off the schedule, as hard as that might be, and allocate it to the commitment of that training. Because if you're trying to see patients in the midst of that training, the training is not going to stick, right? You're going to need help the next day almost, because I've seen it, a dozen times. I know it's a big pill to swallow, but, try to get that outside of patient time. So NDX has that. 3Shape has the different levels of training and a lot of online help. Dentsply has something called Prime Lab that they will come in, and they are actually partnering with NDX as well. They'll come in and do an event and let doctors get their hands on the Prime scan, touch it, feel it, and then dentists that end up purchasing a Prime scan, the Prime Lab team from Dentsply will come back to that same lab and 3, 4, 5 different times after that and train those dentists that purchased on all the different modules and how to use a scanner. Another really great program. So NDX and Dentsply is, good partners in this. Dentsply also did this, and I always thought this was fantastic even before I came to work. This is sort of a interactive PDF. You can see me clicking through this PDF, and everything you would need to know about the scanner and how to do it and how to maintain it and how to clean it, how to adjust it, how to get the parts and pieces, how to hold the camera. All the instructions are right inside this guide. Scanning strategy, scan path strategies. And this is, again, just a PDF that's interactive that I used to download it and store it on my customer's Prime Scan, Omnicam. So they could just click on it right on their little scanner screen and just go click through it and find out what they needed to learn or reinforce. So tools and support, right? Whether it's from a lab, whether it's from a manufacturer, whether it's a partnership like NDX and Dentsply, that's what you're looking for, right? But again, the basics, you're going to have a scanner, and then you're going to have an account in that portal I mentioned, right? Whether it's Case Connect Center, whether it's 3Shape Communicate or My iTero, right? Whatever scanner you have, you're going to have a portal where your scans go and your labs can get them. But you're also going to work with labs like NDX does this really well, where there's going to be, they have their own portal, right? And you can send the scans directly to them. So let me make sure my time is good. All right, so technology. All right, so let's move into our first category, which is ortho, right? And I'm telling you guys that if you have an intraoral scanner, you got to be doing aligners, because it's just so doggone easy these days to do aligner treatment, and your charts are full of people who will do this, right? And I know this because I am one of those, and I'm holding out because my dentist has a scanner, and I go in every 6 months. I'm one of those hygiene patients they love to see coming, because I'm pretty easy. I take pretty decent care of my teeth. But I have a rotated lateral, and had my hygienist scanned my upper and lower arch, a couple of years ago. And, I came back 6 months later, and she looked at it, scanned it again. And she said, what, that lateral has rotated some more. We have something that can fix that, right? And I would say, oh, really? What is it? And they would talk to me about aligners. And I would have bought them several years ago, but they've never. I've had a scan now that my dentist is using a scanner. I've had a scan for a crown, and it was fantastic. I will never have a crown a different way, but still to this day, nobody scanned me full arch and stored that data and then talked to me about maybe something that you could see on the scan. Guys, patients are visual, including me, right? I've been in the business 43 years, but I am visual. If you show me something that you scanned and say, look, this is something I can fix easily for $2,000 over, 6 months, whatever these treatments, might take. And I would say, sign me up. I would have it. Right? I'm going to tell him one day, I said, you missed out on some sales here with me if you would just scan. So my advice to all dental offices with scanners, especially ones that are carts, right, or cables, and you can move around easily, is to get them in your hygienist's hands. And we ought to be scanning every patient that comes into practice. We're not going to talk about where to store all these files tonight, but that is an issue, right? As your scanner builds up files, they could slow down, and we got to offload that stuff onto a hard drive or something. But guys, we're moving into the cloud-based world, and there are things out there now that you can register for and have a membership in, where when you scan a patient, it goes to the cloud and is stored up there, and you can have 2 terabytes of data, and you never bog down your scanner. That the one that is first and foremost in the market now is called DS Core, and again, that's a Dentsply product. So ask your Dentsply rep about that. But DS Core would be a great place, to park all these things. And the cool thing about these cloud-based solutions is that you can now share that with just about anybody in your world, anybody in your circle, say your specialists, right? So the surgeon or the periodontist or your laboratory. And it's not just an intraoral scan. Now we can put our cone beams up there, right? We can put our photographs up there. We can put any documentation up there, and we can say, hey, Mr. Periodontist, I'm going to share this folder with you, and I need you to take a look at this patient for me. So the same with aligners, right? If I'm going to scan for aligners, then we can share it with whoever our aligner company is going to be. So we'll talk about aligners a little bit, and if you haven't done aligners, or you're thinking about, how do I know what a good aligner is? Well, the key points to an ortho aligner is that, look, I want to have minimal refinements. That means I don't want, if I'm a patient, I don't want to have to wear 18 of these things, right? I want this one for 2 weeks, this one 2 weeks. I don't want tons and tons of refinements or tons of appliances. So I like to have that minimal. I want to get the work done, but and I don't want to move them too fast, but I want minimal refinements. And that all comes in, number one, the scan, how accurate the scan. Number two, the design of the model that the appliance is going to be made on. And then, of course, the material of the aligner itself. So minimal refinements means shorter treatment times, which is what our patients are requesting, right? Which is what I would want. Right? And so, there are systems out there that can do it in 8 months. Most take an average of a year, 11 months, but there are some that can do it in 7 or 8 months. And all that is because of software and accuracy of scan, and of course the material it's made out of. The next thing I need my aligner to do is to make it comfortable so the patient wears it, right? Patient compliance is always an issue in ortho treatment, any kind of ortho treatment, but if it's comfortable, then we have better patient compliance. But, you can go too far in the comfort, and now the durability is not there. So you've got to find that balance in your aligners, right? Comfort has to do with, some patients can't stand the gingiva, being straight across. So we scallop them, right? Those are options that you're looking for. Not all systems can do that. How that edge is finished is a big deal. There are most systems are using some sort of laser now to trim and smooth that edge so that we know we get a good comfort. It's pretty widely agreed that the best raw material that we make these out of is Essex ACE material. This is what I think the Dentsply product uses, but several do. You want to have digital workflows, right? I don't want to take an impression, right? I don't want to. You can do that. You can take a traditional impression and send the model off to a lab or a aligner company, and they can scan the model, right? So, but digital workflows are what our patients are demanding, and it's what keeps it tight, right? If I scan a full arch of a patient with one of today's scanners, that's a much better piece of data than taking, say, polyvinyl, polyether, and then pouring stone into that, right? Because we're now adding layers of things that can do make a mistake. So equipment options, scanners, again, they can pretty much all do it, right? But this is the simplicity of an aligner workflow. It's got to be scanned, right? That's going to happen in your hands in your office. And it's got to be planned. That can happen in your office, but can also happen by an outside source, which is what most of them are doing. Then it's got to be fabricated, which again, most of them are handled outside the source. And then it's treatment, which is I'm handing the patient the box, right? So it is a pretty simple workflow, right? We're going to scan it. We can plan it either ourselves. Again, we can purchase the software to do the planning. A lot of orthodontists will do this. And we can take that training, right, and learn how to do this. It's not a challenging thing. The easiest thing to me is scan it and send it to a lab who's handling aligner workflows, which more and more are, right, or send it directly to somebody like Invisalign or SureSmile, right, and they will plan it for you. They will send you back the proposed plan. You say okay, and then boom, they will set to work of printing the appliances and get them, and you'll have them, in 8 to 10 days. Just like when you're picking a lab to partner with your intraoral scanner, you want to pick a aligner provider that's going to give you the training and support you need to know what you need to do as a dentist. So, again, the big boys like SureSmile from Dentsply or Invisalign from Align Technologies all offer this, right? We have SureSmile University. Align has a really great training facility in North Carolina. And, they not only teach you how to use a scanner well, but also, go through all their workflow with aligners. So look for that support in your aligner company. Look for companies that's going to help you with patient education, right? Whether that's literature pieces or websites or portals that they can customize for your practice, where they can go and look and learn all about SureSmile or the aligner treatment. And of course, you want to get the benefits, right? So Dentsply does something called 1DS that gets you bonus points. It's kind of like a frequent flyer thing. So, if you put them all on an even pedestal and you look at them and analyze them and look at the data closely, right now it's clear that the SureSmile are leading the way with the shortest time and are the most effective. Doesn't mean the other ones aren't working by any means. Invisalign's been around for a while and they do great. But recent data is showing us that the SureSmile is the shortest treatment, and it's all got to do with accuracy and material. All right, winding down to question and answer time. So let's just we're not going to go into this because we all know what this is, right? This is why we really think about buying a scanner and putting it in a dental office, right? For our crown and bridge. And so we get in there, we cut our crown prep and we scan. And we send that scan off, and then the lab sends the crown back and we deliver it. And that's the simplicity of this workflow. Now, scanning, right? And again, your scanner companies are going to train you in depth about how to point it, how to wave it, what happens, when you're not getting a good scan and how you can correct it and the things you need to do. I'll give you a few high points, right? Number one, we always have to remember that these scanners are cameras. Right. And most of them are now video capture. Some of them, like the original iTero, was a still capture. I don't know if you noticed it in that first video of the old iTero unit. You could hear the beep, you could hear the voice of the computer in the background telling the doctor where to put it. And, so he would position the camera where the software guided him, and then he would step on a foot pedal and that would take that picture. And then she would say, move it here. And then he would step on the foot pedal. So it stitched about 15 to 18 images together to create the three-dimensional image. Most cameras now use video capture. So we're not stepping on pedals. We're not taking pictures. We're taking movies, and it's basically waving it around. But it's not as simple as that. There are certain scanning strategies or paths that we want to cover. There is a position for the head of the camera. My rule of thumb is that the nose of the camera, the front end of the camera, should always be pointed to the posterior, and the camera should always be at about a 60-degree angle. If I'm capturing the buccal, I'm not going to do a 90-degree perpendicular to the buccal. We're going to do about 60 degrees. So I'm capturing the buccal and some of the occlusal tips and maybe a little bit of the occlusal. Because again, even though it's video, it is stitching everything together. And I want this to be smooth, and I don't want to have to back up and rescan. So overlapping scans by this 60-degree positioning of the camera really helps, especially with crown and bridge when we have hard tissue. In the beginning, these things were okay at hard tissue. Today, they're awesome at hard tissue. They really capture hard tissue well. And the algorithms in these scanners have really been written to capture dentition. So, when we get into an edentulous area, sometimes they get lost and they're not sure what to do. Those algorithms are gradually changing to make scanning edentulous area easier. But right now, scanning like a fully edentulous ridge, we'll talk about that next time, is tough. It's tough, no doubt. But a hard tissue, teeth. Now, up until about 5 years ago, these devices were really, in my opinion, only good for quadrant dentistry. Could mean I couldn't do a full arch, but I had to do it in 3 or 4 different quadrants or segments, because they lost some accuracy when we went around the corner and tried to go all the way around a full arch. And that was just a weakness of the algorithms and even the cameras. That's all been corrected. current generation, and I mean even an older like Omnicam has been updated to say 5.0 software better. That does it, whereas the original Omnicam with original software only was a quadrant scanner. But now with the 5.0 software, it'll do a full arch easily. So that's not a problem anymore. But it used to be that we only would scan quadrants, right? But that was okay because that was a big chunk of our dentistry. But now that we have this cross arch accuracy that we need, scanning a full arch is not a big deal. But because they're cameras, right, we have to remind ourselves they're cameras. And what are they doing? They're taking pictures, right? And so in order to take a good picture of something, you have to be able to see that something, right? And that's why we still have to be pretty meticulous with our management of fluids, management of tissue, right? Management of moisture, right? Retraction, all those things are still very, very much in play. An intraoral camera is going to help you see the scan more readily, to see what you might have missed or what you might need to capture better. Much easier than looking down into a dark purple impression. So, but you do have to see it, right? So we've got cameras that today can scan 5 or 6 millimeters into a sulcus, but the sulcus has got to be retracted enough so that the camera can see the margin. And so we still have to do retraction techniques, and we still have to do moisture control. We don't have scanners today that can scan through, a sulcus that's completely filled with saliva and blood. So we have to get all that out of there. We have to be able to see clearly. And so that's the key to successful crown and bridge scanning, right? Good retraction techniques, good moisture control, and get in there and scan it real quick before, all that starts to rear its ugly head again. So unfortunately, we maybe one day we'll have technology that can just scan through anything. But right now we need to be cautious of that. One of the, or the largest complaints from laboratories about intraoral scans is that I can't see everything, right? Because the doctor didn't capture everything. And it's challenging in the back of the mouth, but at least I have a big monitor I can look at and say, okay, well, that distal margin did not get captured. So let's go in there with some more retraction. Let's dry it off really good and just capture that part of the tooth again. And that's the beauty of stitching, right? I can do this side and I can do that side at 2 different times and it'll stitch it together. So, that is the key takeaway for scanning, right? Is we want to make sure moisture control and retraction is there. Other than that, we're going to follow the best scan strategies developed for whatever device we're using. And they're all a little different, but pretty much the same general overall path, where we start here and we go around the arch and then we loop over and grab this side and then we loop back over and grab the inside. So 3 passes around a full arch is all it should take with any good scanner, right? And so you should shoot for that. And so that's, the crown and bridge, once you've captured we capture the prepared side, right? We capture the opposing, we close the patient down, we capture the buccal surface. And those are the 3 scans we send, right? And that's it, we're done. And we send it to the lab, and in the prescription, we tell it, I want a zirconia crown and I want it in A2. And that's kind of the end game for crown and bridge. And it's, again, no limits to what type of restoration. It could be a veneer, it could be an inlay, it could be a gold crown, it could be zirconia, it could be a bridge, right? And again, we'll get into implants and the scanning for all that. But next week we'll pick up our next presentation. We'll pick up with dentures, which is the absolute positively most requested program I'm doing today. I've done it probably, I counted it. It's well over 100 times in the last 12 to 14 months. And using intraoral scanners to do dentures is really changing the denture world in the dental office. I promise you, you're going to really think dentures can be fun again when you get into this technology. But look at some of these other topics. Think about, all right, it's not just for crowns anymore, right? There's so many other things we can do with this thing, and manipulate the growth of our practice by using a tool that can help us a lot. We look forward to the next time that we chat.
And ask that you take care of those patients. And don't forget to tell us how we can take care of you in the closing survey.